Welcome to 4.0 to Pro, the pickleball podcast that focuses on a single shot, tip, or strategy to improve your pickleball game with every single pocket-sized episode. Our goal is to make you better on the court every time you hear our voices.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, your pocket-sized pickleball podcast, where we teach you a single shot or strategy every single episode, except this one. I'm Michael O'Neill here in Long Beach, California. And it is 2 days before the new CRBN TruFoam paddles come out. They don't know I'm doing this. I didn't even know I was doing this until about 2 minutes ago. And I just decided, you know what? There's a bunch of people that listen to this show. They've heard us talking about CRBN for a long time. And they are wondering, should I get this new paddle? So I just wanted to give you guys my experience with it. Again, this is completely not sponsored by CRBN, but I was at my local club, Los Cab, yesterday, and a bunch of people were asking me about it. And I thought, all right, well, let me just relay my own experience with this paddle and a little bit of the background that I know. I do not work for CRBN. Everything you're about to hear is just my experience chatting with the guys that do own the company and what they've gone through to make this particular paddle. So take it for what it's worth, you know. First and foremost, this was a complicated paddle to make. I think you could qualify this as a Gen 4 paddle, which means that instead of having a honeycomb in there, which, you know, if you don't know the origin story of pickleball paddles, basically what happened was they started using like aircraft honeycomb as the interior part, and then they would put this at the time, graphite or something over the top. And that was kind of a Gen 1 paddle. The Gen 2, they decided to use this Toray T700 carbon fiber. And that's where CRBN, the company, came from. I think they found this carbon fiber. And so basically you were looking at a sandwich of this honeycomb kind of foam with or maybe a honeycomb plastic, I suppose, with this carbon fiber on each side and then a wrapped edge. And then they put a little foam around the outside of the edge, and that's why the paddles had so much power. And ironically enough, the funny part is, I remember when I got my first CRBN 1X, and I was like, wow, this is so powerful that there's no way I could use a 14 millimeter of this because I couldn't keep it on the court. And now it doesn't feel like anything. It's very funny. Anyway, so the Gen 3s, which would be like the Gearbox and the Yola mod, are obviously super hot. Hot being really, really powerful. The challenge that they've had, as we've seen in the headlines, is that part of the, I just said challenge, but part of the challenge, I think, for a pickleball company is they kind of keep moving the goalposts in terms of what is legal in a paddle. So USA Pickleball and all the sanctioning bodies have specific tests that they use for these paddles. And before, it was grit was the big deal. And then when people started like whacking their paddles with sledgehammers to try to get them to, you know, compress and get a little springboard effect out of it, they had to start measuring, well, how much deflection do these paddles have? And when the new Yolas came out, they just were so ridiculously powerful. If you remember, they had this whole big announcement, and they had like the new Ben Johns, and they had, you know, all of these new paddles, and they got almost instantly outlawed, which was a real bummer, I suppose, for Yola, who probably spent millions and millions of dollars on them. So then they came out with the mods, which, you know, to me were sort of just barely within the rules, but now those things are being outlawed in, I think it's April. It was supposed to be April. Maybe it's June or something now. But the problem was when you're a smaller company like CRBN, I mean, CRBN's a family company. It's like Garrett and his mom and a few other people now. But you can't afford to make a huge issue or a mistake when it comes to manufacturing these paddles. You don't have those kinds of unlimited budgets of the Selkirks and the Yolas, who are, you know, big international global corporations. So they had to make sure they were well within the rules. And then at the same time, they wanted to offer a new experience. So the first time I ever hit one of the prototypes of this paddle, what's now called the TruFoam Genesis, or the Genesis TruFoam, one of the two, I was blown away, first of all, by how soft it felt. Like it felt like it was flexing under me. And if you ever came from tennis, that's a pleasant flex. It's a nice feel of the paddle, especially compared to my 1X, which felt, especially brand new out of the box, it felt very, very stiff to me. So I hit a few of those, and some of them were very powerful. And I said, wow, this is maybe more powerful than the Gearbox and the Yola. Well, they've since reduced the power of that paddle, and that was on purpose. I think they want to stay well within the parameters of the law, if you will, with these new paddles. And I think you could consider them a Gen 4 because now it's just foam on the inside, and foam can come in millions of different densities and bouncing and deflections and all these kinds of different things. So you can really tune that foam. And I think one of the challenges that Carbon had was they were so specific about what they wanted this thing to feel like that they could recreate it when they were literally hand making the prototypes. They had a guy here in California that was literally making them by hand, and they were great. But when it came to manufacturing, they had a very hard time getting the same consistency out of the paddles. So as far as I know, and again, don't hold me to this, they had to invent new tooling to make these paddles. And that is the huge difference between where paddles came from, where they were just taking aircraft materials that already existed and then making those into a paddle shape by laser cutting the carbon out and then sandwiching them, the foam between. Well, now they're doing something where they're basically making a paddle from scratch. And this is a pure pickleball paddle that never existed in the world before, and they didn't have the tooling to make such a thing. So they had to send a person over to Asia for months to dial in this paddle to the spec. So my actual playing experience, I have now played the Carbon 1, which is the elongated, the 2 is the square, and the 3 is that kind of hybrid shape where it's an extended elongated. And I play the 1 and the 2 exclusively. And let me just sort of go through my experiences with them. The 1, well, first and foremost, overall, the experience, if you've come from any sort of carbon paddle prior to this, everything's better. And I don't know how they did it, but this paddle has 30% more power, 40% more spin. I mean, the spin on this thing is insane. And it's got a softer feel to it. Like the actual touch of the paddle, it just feels nicer to dink and to reset than to me the 1X does, or the 2X. The 1X, I really like if you have a game that is very offensive, lots of drives and, pressure from the midcourt. I really like the 1X. That one feels really good to me. If you have a game that you feel is a little bit more reactive in terms of hands battles, dinking, short game, resets, the 2, which is the square shape, may feel better to you. It's got a lovely solid feel. The resets are awesome and the hands are exceptional. I couldn't quite get the power for the drive where I wanted it, but I'm experimenting with weights. This is on the 2 shape, the square shape. I couldn't quite get the power where I wanted it, at least compared to the 1, which just feels like it just has a war hammer. Like you can really, and you can't believe the spin and how the ball can dip. But I'll say that I still am kind of between the 1 and the 2. If I had to play with each, I'd be like, all right, maybe I'll use the 2 for doubles and the 1 for singles. But I played with the 1 last night. Again, I thought I played very well. Being 5'8", I'm not a super tall guy, so I do appreciate that it's an extended paddle length. That inch or so that I can reach out and grab a far ball is really good for me. I have both of them weighted right at the throat. So just one of the carbon weights on each side. I want to say they're like 0.8 ounces. I could be wrong on that. Again, I'm not like a representative necessarily of them, but I have it on the throat just for a little bit of stability. On the 2, I might experiment with putting a little bit more weight towards the top of the paddle and getting a little more swing weight on it to see if I can get a little bit more power in the drives. But I feel like that may be at the mercy of the lovely lightning fast hand speed you get out of that particular paddle. So your mileage may vary, obviously. If you are a Carbon player now, this is a very natural evolution. And what I found was the second I took it out of the box, I just played better with it. Pure. Like, what it did not require a huge amount of getting used to. When I went from the standard Carbon to the 1X, it took me like 6 weeks to figure out resets. And granted, I'm a better player now than I was then, but it was to me a pretty big jump from the standard to the 1X, like the standard 1 to the 1X. This feels like an evolution to me. This feels like a lovely, proper evolution of a paddle. It will definitely have more power. It will definitely have the ability for you to spend less energy resetting the ball, meaning you don't have to put as much of your own physical energy into it to get the ball to go where you want. I'm still getting used to that a little bit, but it's weird. Between the 1 and the 2, I have a harder time going between those two than I did going from my 1X to the TruFoam 1. Meaning, like, if I switch between those two paddles, I can definitely tell the difference. The 2 feels lovely and poppy. Don't get me wrong. If you are someone who's got a precision game and you love hands battles, you may just love the 2. If you are someone that loves a power game and you like to put pressure, then I think you'll love the 1. I haven't had a ton of experience with the 3, if I'm being honest. It's not my favorite shape of Carbon. I felt like personally, and again, this is all my personal opinion, it's almost like a hybrid bicycle where it's like, it doesn't really do road very well. It doesn't really do mountain very well. That's kind of how I felt about the 3. But the 3 to me may be the perfect like casual player shape. It just didn't work really well for me trying to play at a slightly higher level. So if you guys have any questions about these paddles at all, I think you can find me, certainly, at picklehelp.com. You can find me on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro or at Solo Hour, SOLOHOUR. And if you don't know, we have a contest going on now where you can actually win a Carbon paddle. It's the 3, in fact. It is 402p.com/contest, 402p.com/contest. At any rate, I think you'll love how it feels. I think it's a really great paddle. If you are on the fence about checking it out, if you're anywhere in Southern California and you know where I am, you can come and find me and I will happily loan you the paddle for a game or 2 and you can see what it feels like. My inclination is that they're probably going to sell really quickly. So if you are interested, you might jump on that list. As always, you can go to carbonpickleball.com and use 402p at checkout to get 10% off of that particular paddle. But I hope this is helpful. This was a very spontaneous, spur-of-the-moment thing I decided to do. And if you decide to get it, I would love to hear your feedback on that paddle. All right, guys, take care.
Thank you for listening to 4.0 to Pro. For more tips, find us on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro. If you have a pickleball question, submit it at picklehelp.com. Now, get out there and dominate. But don't forget to have fun.